Riders, welcome back to Sam's Bikes, where you know we only talk e-bikes. And this is my 6-month review on the Hayes Dominions, which I've been riding on my Levo. Let's get into it. Any mountain bike fan from the 90s is going to have a place in their heart for Hayes brakes, because Hayes made some of the best brakes on the market at that time. Fast forward 2018, they released the Dominions, and then fast forward, I think, to last year, the Atherton race program actually went from trick stuff brakes to the Hayes Dominions, which I thought was very interesting. When I saw that, I knew I had to try them. And before we crack on with the review, a massive shout out to Topic, who have just come on for a 2-year sponsorship slot at Sam's Bikes. Absolute legends. Love Topic products forever and stoked to have them on board. And I know I harp on about it, but this is my favorite tool out of all my tools behind me. This is the Topic Torque Stick Pro, and I honestly couldn't live without it. So what do we have? We've got a torque wrench, which is kind of a mini size, and it goes from 4 to 20 Newton meters. And then you have a smaller wrench to get into the tighter spaces. And then you have this small grip, which I don't even know what you'd call it, but it's such a great idea. You can get into like the really tight spots, and you also have an extension for even harder spots to reach. And you have a T6 to T30, and you have an Allen key, so 1.5 to 10. I'm pretty sure you can do almost everything on your bike with this toolkit. Highly recommend it. And riders, if you haven't subscribed to Sam's Bikes, please do so. Share it with like-minded people. It really means a lot. Now, on to the review. For a set of the Hayes Dominions, they'll set you back around 350 to 400 euros with a quick search on Google, and then probably another 60 to 80 for discs and adapters, etc. And how do the Hayes Dominions look? Well, I'm going to say they're definitely not a flashy looking brake. They're not ugly, but definitely not a standout as a looker. Nothing like a TRP or a Trick Stuff or a Hope or even the new Srams. And what about installation? Well, full disclosure, riders, I did not install these brakes. I'm not the greatest mechanic out there, but I had my mechanic Sam do it, who's a very good mechanic, and these are some of his thoughts. He said it was a very easy setup. First bleed, and they were dialed. He thought it was great it had 2 bleed ports in the caliper, so you could get all the air out. And as I said, Sam's a gun mechanic, and he thought the Hayes Dominions were very well thought about for setting up and mechanical work. And one thing that Sam mentioned, that he was trying to use the Sram adapters because this bike came originally with Sram codes, and they didn't line up perfectly, so we had to order some Hayes brake pad adapters or spacers. So if you are getting the brakes, definitely order the adapters as well. Okay, legend riders, how did I find the Hayes brakes for the last 6 months? Well, on the first ride, I was loving the setup because you actually have 2 points of adjustments. You can adjust the lever and the throw or the bite of the caliper. Love that. Played around with that a fair bit. And I was a little bit scared on the first ride because the brakes felt quite bitey. And after I bed them in first, I thought the front might be a bit Shimano-y, like really lock up. And I have had a few crashes trying brakes the first time, so I did take it easy. And like any new product, especially brakes, there is a courting period to the relationship. Like, you have to understand each other. Brakes are super personal and a little bit dangerous if you don't give it time to understand them. But after the courting period, it was a perfect relationship. Let me explain that a little bit more. So I love the feel of the lever. I love the bite point. The bite point is small, but you can feel exactly where it's going to bite. You have a little bit of modulation there, and through the modulation you can feel it ramp up to the power. Also, you have the adjustment, the 2 points of adjustment out in the trail, which I absolutely love. Also, something I really like on the Hayes, and I've never seen it before on any brakes. When you initially set up the caliper and set up the perfect distance between the rotor, you have these side bolts which allow you to set it and forget it. And if you are ever working on your bike and your brakes again, you can actually pull the caliper off and put it back on, and it goes back in exact alignment. This is genius. So all in all, a great brake. And how do they compare to all the competition on the market? Well, I've been lucky enough, riders, to ride pretty much every brake on the market, and I'll give you a rundown of the most popular brakes and how I think they compare. Magura brakes, which I run a lot, have a little bit more, well, quite a bit more modulation, but I would say the power is about the same. And then you got Shimano, Shimano, I feel the Dominions have a bit more power, but they also have a little bit more bite. So the Shimano are very much on-off, where the Dominions have a little bit more modulation. Then you have the Srams, and I haven't ridden the new Mavens, but the code RSCs that I had on this bike before, power's the same, more modulation on the Sram, but I would say almost less controllable or usable modulation. I find with the Sram, it has the modulation, but then it all ramps up at the end, so it's not you don't feel exactly where it breaks. I'm gonna say the Haze, for me, feel kind of in between a Shimano, more power than a Shimano, more modulation than a Shimano, and less modulation than a Magura, but about the same power. Hope that makes sense to you riders. So out of the 4 major brands on the market for brakes, which is the best? That is impossible to say, riders, because you can have 2 fantastic riders or pros. Look at all the pros. They might love one set of brakes and hate the other, and vice versa. I'm gonna say these are a very good brake if you like the idea of having a little bit more modulation than a Shimano and a little bit less modulation than a Magura. Not all gravy, the things I'd like to see improved or changed on the Haze brakes. I think Haze have a great product here, but I also think a lot of the purchasers these days are looking at design and how those brakes look on their bike. I think Haze could have spent a little bit more time designing the brakes to look a little bit better. And this is a small thing. With the lever, the bounce back spring doesn't have a really positive, or it's a bit slow, and it doesn't give you that nice bounce back like a TRP might. I would like to see a stronger spring for the bounce back, but it's not going to affect the braking at all. And one thing I'm not sure about, but I think the Haze brakes eat brake pads faster than other brakes, because I got Sam to do a couple of months service on the bike, and we ate through both the brake pads, which seemed a little bit faster than the other, but that's not a scientific test at all. That's just what I felt. They might burn through the pads a bit faster. Riders, if you have any experience of that, let me know in the comments. And now, down to the conclusion. Well, I think the Haze brakes are a fantastic set of brakes. I think they're definitely on par with all the majors. It really depends on what you're looking for in a brake. I love that they have a little bit more modulation than a Shimano and a little bit less than a Magura, and probably the same power as a Magura. Definitely a fantastic brake. Definitely can recommend them. And riders, I hope you enjoyed this review. And like always, if you have any questions, put them in the comments and I'll definitely get back to you. And subscribe to Sam's Bikes if you haven't already. Share it with like-minded people, and we're going to see you next week.